Look at this Vespa. No sharp edges, no exposed engine, just one continuous shape. It gives you this feeling of freedom, of romance, like life is supposed to feel exactly like this. La dolce vita. But how can a scooter make you feel that? It's not a Ferrari or Harley or Rolls-Royce. Sometimes it costs even less than your smartphone. And yet, it's in the museums, on fashion runways, or even on postage stamps in 15 countries. So what's the reason behind this feeling? Is it the Italian origins that brings the feeling of food, culture, and architecture? Or is it the movies and media that made a whole generation fall in love with a scooter they had never seen in real life? Or maybe it was always the design. So in this video, we'll explore what makes a Vespa feel like freedom. What's the design philosophy behind their scooters? And exactly what can you steal from them and apply to your own work? And to answer all of that, we first need to understand that how a vehicle built for the poorest people in the world ended up becoming a symbol of the good life.
The forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe.
Italy, 1945. The Second World War is over. Cities were bombed, roads were destroyed, and the economy was in pieces. The average Italian could not afford a car or even a bicycle to go from one place to another. And in the middle of all of this, there was a man named Enrico Piaggio. His company used to make ships, aircrafts, and bomber planes. And after the war, he was left with a destroyed factory, a workforce with nothing to do, and a country that desperately needed to move again. So he decided that Piaggio will make a cheap, simple vehicle that anyone could ride and that could survive the broken and bombed out streets of post-war Italy. But there was a problem. None of his engineers had ever designed a scooter. So he called Corradino di Ascanio. He was an aeronautical engineer who designed and built one of the first functional helicopters in the history. But he hated the motorcycles. He thought they were dirty, uncomfortable, and overcomplicated. So he sat down to design this vehicle and asked one simple question. What if we don't look at other motorcycles and design from scratch for humans? And they started with this. This was one of the first sketches of the prototype that gave birth to the iconic Vespa design. It started with a person sitting down in a natural position, hands on the handlebars and feet flat on the floor. And then he built everything around that image. Like the engine, which is hot, exposed, and usually sits between the rider's legs, he moved it entirely to the side and mounted directly on the rear wheel. The chain drive, which is dirty, oily, and always breaking, he eliminated it completely because the engine was now close enough to the wheel to drive it directly. Then, the tall crossbar frame, which you have to swing your leg over, was completely replaced by a low, open, and step-through body. Then, he also made the wheels smaller to just 8 inches. Because a smaller wheel can keep the whole vehicle compact and low while matching the natural seated height of a human body. And then he took all the remaining parts like the cables, the joints, and the ugly functional bits and wrapped everything in one continuous monocoque body. When the first time Enrico Piaggio saw the prototype, he looked at the shape and said, "Sembra una Vespa." It looks like a wasp. And with that name and that design, on April 23rd, 1946, Piaggio launched the Vespa 98. 98cc, 3.2 horsepower, and 60 km/h top speed.
Vai con Vespa. Belle massacranti. E allora, vai con Vespa.
In the first year, Piaggio sold only 2,500 units. The year after, over 10,000, and by the year 1950, they had sold over 100,000 units. It was not just a vehicle anymore. It became the symbol of freedom. The freedom to get on something, go somewhere, and feel the wind in your hair. And then it crossed into the films. In the movie Roman Holiday in 1953, when Audrey Hepburn hopped on the back of a Vespa with Gregory Peck and was traveling through Rome, that one scene turned Vespa into a global symbol overnight. And it was not a paid promotion by Piaggio. Hollywood just looked at Italy and saw what the young and beautiful were riding through the city and put it in the frame. Then, in 1955, Piaggio launched the GS, the Grand Sport, and everything shifted up a gear. The body became more aerodynamic and more swept. The engine jumped to 150cc, now capable of 100 km per hour. It became the first Vespa that could genuinely keep up with the city traffic. They also added other features like a 4-speed gearbox, a longer saddle, and the handlebars, which were now fully enclosed in a faired headset. It looked like it was designed not just to move you, but to make people watch you when you move. That's why, in just 1 year, the total Vespa sales reached to 1 million. They were now being manufactured not just in Italy, but in Germany, France, Spain, Belgium, and in the UK. Meanwhile, in the UK, a new subculture was emerging: the mods. Young, fashion-obsessed, working-class Londoners who treated the Vespa not as a transport, but as a fashion accessory. They chose it over the motorcycles because it was clean, stylish, and easy to customize. They covered their Vespas in mirrors, added extra lights, and painted them in custom colors. The scooter became a canvas for their identity. The mod subculture made the UK Vespa's largest global market in the 1960s. So a scooter built for poor Italians became the defining status object of British youth culture. Not because of any campaign, but because of the object itself, its shape, its cleanness, its quiet confidence. And then, back in Italy, the Italian government had just passed a new law, making number plates mandatory on any vehicle over 50cc. So Piaggio launched the Vespa 50, or the Vespino. It was small enough to be exempt and small enough for a teenager to ride without a license. By going smaller, Piaggio captured an entire new generation of kids who grew up on the 50 and then bought bigger ones as they grew older. Then, over the next 30 years, the Vespa design went from soft and feminine to bold and muscular, and finally to sharp and modern. And each shift happened for a reason. The first Primavera appeared in 1968. It was the year of protest and the rise of left-wing, anti-war, and youth counterculture. And the Primavera matched that energy perfectly. It was small-framed, delicate, and beautifully proportioned. Everything about it was soft. The curves of the front shield flowed gently into the body. The rear fender was rounded and light, and the whole silhouette had an almost feminine elegance to it. It was not trying to be aggressive or to be fast. It was asking to be loved. Then, from the 1970s on, the same young generation wanted to cross borders and travel. They felt this need for a top-performing vehicle with a distinct new style, and Piaggio responded with the PX. The PX was first presented in 1977 in Milan as the Nuova Linea, the new line. And new exactly is the right word, because where the Primavera was soft, the PX was more square. The front shield became more upright and structured. The body panels had sharper creases running through them. The whole stance became lower, wider, and more muscular. But still, it was unmistakably a Vespa. The monocoque body, the step-through frame, and the single-sided front suspension. All of the original Vespa design elements were still there. But the emotional register had shifted completely. The PX became the most successful Vespa ever made. It stayed in production for over 40 years and sold over 3 million units. But in 1982, Piaggio pushed the language even further with the PK. It borrowed the small compact body of the Primavera and the boxy upright shield of the PX. But now the lines were sharper, the surfaces were flatter, and most importantly, the continuous unbroken engine shell was now separate removable parts with visible seams. And then later in '84, they even added an automatic gearbox. So no clutch, no gear change, just twist and go. It was easier, more practical, and anyone could ride it. But then in the 1980s, something happened. Brands like Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, and Camco arrived with scooters that were lighter, cheaper, and more fuel efficient. And they also came with automatic transmissions as standard. And they were not slow. A Honda today or Yamaha Jog could do everything a commuter needed for sometimes half the price of a Vespa. For a brand like Vespa that was built on being the affordable option, this was an existential problem. The company that has sold over 1 million Vespas a year in its peak was now struggling to sell a few thousand. And the reason was not just the price, it was relevance. The Japanese scooters looked modern, plastic bodies, aerodynamic surfaces, and sharp angles. And next to them, the Vespa, with its pressed steel body and its analog dials, looked like something that your grandfather used to ride. But even at their lowest point, the brand of Vespa was completely intact. So designers like Versace and Dolce & Gabbana started treating Vespa not as a vehicle but as a design object. It appeared in their lookbooks and their runway sets. Because the Vespa had something common with the best fashion objects, a personality and a point of view. It had this silhouette that you could recognize it from 50 meters away. And then Hollywood also remembered it. In the movies like The Talented Mr. Ripley, The Interpreter, directors kept reaching for the same object because it kept meaning the same thing: freedom, youth, and the feeling that wherever you are is exactly where you should be. And all of this gave confidence to Piaggio to believe in themselves and to bounce back. So they launched the ET in 1996 and the Gran Turismo in 2003. Both of these models helped them to get back into market and stop the bleeding. But the real statement came in 2013 with the Vespa 946, a design object that happened to move. Every surface of it was refined to a point where it barely looked manufactured. The body panels were thinner and more precise than any Vespa before. The details like the grille, the badge, the seat stitching were treated with the obsession of a luxury watch. And that's why Piaggio was not presenting it at motor shows. They were presenting it at fashion weeks. Giorgio Armani and Christian Dior each got their own limited edition versions of 946. This was Vespa's way of saying out loud what culture had been saying for decades, that this scooter is not just for transport, it's for the expressions, for the romance, for the freedom. And when Instagram arrived, the 946 became the bucket list of every trip to Italy. The silhouette, the form, the colors were so perfect that you can drop it on any street in Italy and you already have a perfect Instagram-worthy photograph.
Ho disposto uno sterzo in corrispondenza della ruota anteriore, automaticamente la forma nasce.
That's how a vehicle built for the poorest people in post-war Italy became a luxury object that the culture carries forward on its own. But what actually made that possible? What are all the principles and philosophies behind that make Vespa Vespa? It comes down to three things. Number one, the humanness in the design. Number two, the clarity in the identity. And number three, the rootedness in the culture. Let's start with the humanness. Most vehicles are designed around the engine, and the engine has requirements like the size, heat, access, and at the end, the human arrange themselves around those requirements. That's just how it's always been done. But Toscanio refused that logic entirely. He started with the body, a person sitting naturally, and then he rearranged the machine around that person. And the result was not just a comfortable scooter, It was a specific feeling that nobody felt before. When you sit on a Vespa, you're upright, you're open, your feet are flat, there's no crouch, no lean, no tension in the shoulders. The riding position is closer to sitting in a cafe than piloting a vehicle. And that posture changes everything. You stop fighting the road and starts inhabiting it. Like there's a word in design called affordance. The idea that an object communicates how it wants to be used through its shape alone. And the Vespa's affordance is freedom. Not of power or of speed, but freedom of sitting as you want, keeping your foot where you want, changing your posture as you want. And more importantly, the freedom of a rider. If you see a Vespa, it's the most popular two-wheeler among women. The step-through frame and the concealed engine allows them to ride it with skirts or any dress without any discomfort or any dirt. Because unlike other motorcycles, it's not tied to a race, a gender, or a tax class. A Vespa has its own personality, its own identity, and that brings us to the second principle of clarity in identity. See, during tough times, most brands panic, and then they start trying to be everything to everyone. They add features, they drop prices, they change the competition, and in doing that, they slowly stop being themselves. When the Japanese and Taiwanese scooters started flooding the market with lighter, cheaper, and modern-looking scooters, Piaggio also felt the same pressure. The brand that sold 1 million scooters was struggling to sell a few thousands. And of course, the obvious answer was to compete on the price, on the feature, but then they understood that when you see a Vespa, nobody thinks about the power of the engine or fuel efficiency or transmission. You think about Italy, you think about youth, you think about the feeling that wherever you are going, it's going to be worth it. That is the identity of Vespa. It lives in the shape, in the posture, in the silhouette. And once they had that clarity, they never looked back. They kept launching new models, but with the same identity. The ET in '96, the Gran Turismo in 2003, and the 946 in 2013. Each one with new technology, modern engineering, and contemporary details, but each one with the same feeling of identity. The monocoque body, the step-through frame, the front suspension, and that's something which is very difficult for most brands to manage, knowing what to change and knowing what to never touch. And Vespa didn't have to protect its identity alone, because somewhere along the way, the culture stepped in, and they started doing it for them. Which brings us to a third principle, the rootedness in the culture. You could call it luck or you could call it timing, but the truth is, Vespa never had to buy its way into culture. The movies were not a paid placement, the mods were never sponsored, the Instagram was never a strategy. Every single one of these cultural moments that carried Vespa forward happened because the object earned it. And I think this is the most underrated idea in all of design, that if you build something with enough humanness and enough clarity, you eventually stop needing to push it. The culture starts pulling it forward on its own. There's a term in physics called resonance. When an external force matches the natural frequency of an object, the object starts to amplify the force rather than resist it. Which means that you don't need to put more energy, you just need to start vibrating at the right frequency. And I think that's what Vespa achieved. Like the mods were vibrating at a frequency of identity and self-expression. The fashion world was vibrating at a frequency of craft and elegance. Instagram was vibrating at a frequency of beauty and wanderlust. And somehow, the Vespa was already present at all of these frequencies. Because when the first two philosophies are held completely over a long enough period of time, then the object stops belonging to the company and starts belonging to the world. Now that's all about how Vespa did it. But what can we learn from this? So there are 3 things that you can learn and apply to your own work. Number 1, always start with the first principles. Number 2, build your product as a functional art. And number 3, take a finished product and turn it into a category of one. So let's start with the first principles. Aristotle defined the first principles as the first basis from which a thing is known. It means you take a problem and strip it all the way back. You have to look beyond the existing solutions or conventions or how it's usually done. And when you hit the ground, then you build back up from scratch. Like in the case of Vespa, Descanio looked at a human body and asked, what does this person actually needs to move through a destroyed city cleanly, comfortably, and affordably? And from there, every answer followed logically, like moving engine on the side, removing the chain drive, and making a step-through frame. And this could work for anything you're building. Like if you're designing a rocket, the conventional answer is to make it with carbon fiber, assemble it with hundreds of contractors, and use it for just a single launch. That's just how rockets are built and used in the past. But if you strip it back and ask what's the most honest way to build a rocket, you arrive at somewhere completely different. You can make them reusable, you can make them with steel, and you can assemble them in-house. That's exactly what SpaceX did, and they brought the cost of a launch down by 90%. And once you have these solutions based on the first principles, then you have to build your product as a functional art. There is a myth in design that function and beauty are intention, that you have to choose, make it practical and plain, or make it impractical and beautiful. And Vespa proved that this is a false choice. They decided to have a step-through frame and engine on the side due to functional reasons, but the shape and the monocoque body turned it into a piece of art. That's why it landed in the art museums like the Museum of Modern Arts. And you can do this with any product. Like, let's say you have to design a laptop. A conventional laptop is built around its components. The parts arrive from 20 different suppliers, and the body is shaped around wherever they fit. It's functional, it does the job, but the decisions stop at function. Instead of making it like a conventional laptop, you can make it like a MacBook, which feels like every component is placed exactly where it belongs. There's a visual harmony among them. Apple made the same functional decisions but refused to let any of them be ugly. So first principles tells you what to question, and functional art tells you how to build it. And once you have a finished product, then you have to turn it into a category of one. A category of one brand is so distinct that it is no longer compared to competitors on price or specs. It exists in its own